I didn't even open the envelope at first. It was beige. Cheap paper. The kind that screams authority without actually having any. I tossed it on the kitchen counter, stepped over my boots, and went straight to the sink. Dirt still under my nails. Another long day clearing brush along the south fence line. My land wasn't small and it definitely wasn't neat, but it was mine. The envelope sat there, quiet, watching. I only picked it up later because my coffee mug needed the space. HOA violation notice, printed in bold. All caps. No greeting. I laughed out loud. Cute, I said to the empty kitchen. I flipped it open anyway. You are in violation of multiple community standards, including but not limited to unapproved fencing, improper storage of equipment, non-compliant exterior appearance. You have 14 days to correct these issues or face fines, enforcement actions, or legal escalation. At the bottom, a signature block. Ridgeview Estates Homeowners Association. I read it twice, then a third time, because here's the thing. I don't live in Ridgeview Estates. I never have, and I sure as hell never agreed to any HOA. My property sits right next to their subdivision. Always has. Long before their identical houses, their decorative street lamps, their carefully approved mailbox colors. I bought this land 10 years ago. Cash. Clean title. No covenants. No restrictions. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I ignored it. 3 days later, another letter showed up. This one had more words, and a different tone. Less notice. More threat. Failure to comply may result in daily fines of $250. Continued noncompliance may involve municipal authorities. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. They weren't just confused. They were confident. That's what bothered me. I decided to handle it the adult way. I called the number. A woman answered. Tight voice. Smiling through the phone. Ridgeview Estates HOA. This is Karen speaking. Of course it was. Hi, I said. Calm. Polite. I think there's been a mistake. I don't belong to your HOA. A pause. Yes, you do. No, I said, still calm.
Ion Parcel 17B.
It's not part of Ridgeview Estates. Another pause. Shorter this time. All properties adjacent to the community are subject to HOA oversight. That's when I sat up straight. That's not how property law works, I said. She sighed. An actual sigh. Sir, are you refusing to comply? I'm refusing something I never agreed to, I said. There's a difference. Her tone hardened. If you don't resolve this, we'll be forced to escalate. I almost laughed again. Escalate to who? There was a smile in her voice now. The dangerous kind. We'll involve the authorities. That night, I walked my property line. The sun was dropping low, turning the houses in Ridgeview gold and orange. Perfect lawns. Perfect symmetry. Every fence exactly the same height. And then there was my side. Tall grass. Old oak trees. A shed that had definitely seen better decades. A tractor parked wherever it stopped last. I could feel their eyes sometimes. From behind those identical windows. I stopped at the boundary marker. A rusted metal pin I'd personally verified with a surveyor years ago. Still there. Still mine. They weren't confused. They just didn't like that I didn't match. The third letter came by certified mail. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. Final notice before enforcement. I didn't open it. I already knew what it said. Instead, I grabbed the original deed from my safe. Then the survey. Then the county plat map I'd printed years ago, just in case. I laid them out on the table like cards in a poker game. Straight flush. I was legally untouchable. Or so I thought. The next morning, I was replacing a broken post near the road when I heard tires crunching on gravel. 2 cars. One white sedan with the HOA logo slapped on the side. And behind it, a black and white cruiser. Lights off, but unmistakable. They had actually done it. They called the cops. I rested my hammer on the fence post and waited. Not angry, not worried, just curious. Because whatever they thought they were enforcing, they had no idea who actually owned this land. The cruiser door opened first. The officer stepped out slow, one hand resting near his belt, the other holding a clipboard. Neutral face, observant eyes, the kind of calm that comes from having seen every kind of stupid argument 1,000 times. Then the white sedan door swung open like it had something to prove. A man in his late 50s climbed out, polo shirt tucked too tightly into khaki pants, sunglasses perched on his head like a crown. He didn't look around. He looked at me, like I was already guilty. "That's him," he said, pointing before anyone asked anything. I set the hammer down carefully. "Morning," I said to the officer. "Something I can help you with?" The officer nodded. "We got a call about a property dispute." The HOA guy scoffed. Loudly. "Dispute?" he said. "No, officer. This homeowner is refusing to comply with community regulations. We've issued multiple notices." The officer glanced at him, then back at me. "Sir," he said, "do you live here?" "Yes." "Are you part of Ridgeview Estates HOA?" "No." The HOA guy laughed. A sharp, practiced laugh. "He says that every time," he said. "But he's clearly inside our boundary." I didn't say anything. I just watched the officer's eyebrow lift slightly. "That's not something I can take someone's word on," the officer said. "Do you have documentation?" The HOA guy's smile widened. "Of course," he said. "Our community map clearly shows." "Not that," the officer interrupted. "A deed. Survey. Something official." The HOA guy blinked. "Well," he said, adjusting his collar. "The HOA governs." The officer turned to me. "Sir." I walked toward the porch. "Give me a minute." Inside, the papers were exactly where I'd left them. Neat. Ready. I grabbed the folder and walked back out. I handed it to the officer. "Original deed," I said. "County-recorded survey. Plat map." The officer flipped through them slowly. Very slowly. The HOA guy leaned in, arms crossed, tapping his foot. "That land was absorbed when the community expanded," he said. "Everyone knows that." The officer stopped flipping. "Everyone knows isn't a legal concept," he said. He turned the map toward the HOA guy. "See this?" he said, pointing. "This parcel ends here. Ridgeview starts there." "That can't be right," the HOA guy said. "It is," the officer said. The HOA guy's face tightened. "He has unapproved structures," he said quickly. "Unsafe conditions. Visual blight. Couldn't help it." I smiled. "Officer," I said, "is visual blight a crime now?" The officer didn't smile back, but his tone shifted. "No," he said, "it's not." He handed the folder back to me. "Sir," he said, "from what I can see, this is private property, not under HOA jurisdiction." The HOA guy stepped forward. "So you're just going to ignore clear violations?" he snapped. The officer turned fully to him now. "Violations of what?" he asked. "Our standards." The officer took a breath. "HOA standards aren't law," he said, "and they don't apply to landowners who aren't members." The HOA guy's confidence wavered. Just a crack. "But he's adjacent," he said. "He affects property values." The officer's voice hardened. "That's not my problem." Silence fell. The wind moved through the tall grass. Somewhere down the road, a sprinkler clicked on in Ridgeview, misting a perfectly manicured lawn. The HOA guy looked at me, this time without the smile. "You'll hear from our lawyers," he said. I nodded. "Tell them to read the deed," I said. He turned, marched back to his sedan, and slammed the door. The officer lingered. "Sorry about that," he said. "They call a lot." "I figured," I said. He hesitated. "Off the record," he said, lowering his voice. "They don't like things they can't control. I've noticed." He tipped his hat and drove off. I stood there long after the dust settled. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 2 weeks passed. No letters. No calls. I almost let myself relax. Then the survey stakes disappeared. Not moved. Gone. The metal pin at the boundary ripped out. I stood there staring at bare dirt. Cold anger crept up my spine. That pin wasn't decorative. It was a legal marker. Someone had crossed onto my land. On purpose. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of machinery. Not mine. Bulldozer. I grabbed my boots and ran outside. At the far edge of my property, 2 contractors were unloading equipment. Behind them, orange flags marked a line that cut through my land. And standing there, clipboard in hand, the HOA president, smiling again. "We're installing a privacy buffer," he said. "Community approved." I felt something settle in my chest. Not fear. Not panic. Resolve. "You're trespassing," I said. He shook his head. "This land is under HOA authority," he said. "Our attorneys confirmed it." I looked past him at the workers. "Stop," I said. "Now." They hesitated. The HOA president's smile faded. "You don't have the authority." "Oh," I said quietly. "I do." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been hoping not to use. "Hi," I said when they answered. "Yeah, they're back." And this time they brought equipment. I hung up and looked at the HOA president. "You really should have checked who owned this land," I said. His smile didn't come back. The bulldozer engine growled like it owned the morning. I stood at the edge of my property. Boots sunk slightly into the soft dirt, heart steady. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I just watched. The HOA president and his contractors paused. Orange flags fluttered in the wind. They marked the line that wasn't theirs. I raised my hand slowly. "Step back. You're on private property." One of the workers, a young guy with a neon vest, looked confused. He glanced at the clipboard in the president's hand. "Sir," he said hesitantly, "we were told to start here." I shook my head. "You were told wrong." The president stepped forward, tapping his tablet. "Our attorneys verified this is under HOA jurisdiction. You can't stop us." I smiled. Calm, deliberate. "Attorneys don't move boundaries," I said. "The county does. And I've got the deed, the survey, and a plat map." He leaned in closer, voice dropping. "Do you really want to make this a legal battle?" I took a step forward. "I already am." The workers froze. A bulldozer operator's hand hovered over the joystick. He looked at the flags, then at me, then back at the president. "You sure?" he muttered under his breath. The president snapped. "Yes. Move forward." I raised my phone and started recording. Not for social media. Not for entertainment. For evidence. Every step they took past my markers would be trespassing. Every foot of dirt they disturbed could become a legal liability. I let the bulldozer inch forward. I let tension build. Then, finally, I spoke. "Stop." The operator paused mid-motion, hesitating. The president turned red. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "And now, every action you take is documented." 10 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of another engine. A truck pulling up the driveway. It was a county inspector. I waved him over. Calm. Collected. He stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Morning," he said, eyes scanning the land. "Complaint about encroachment?" I nodded. "They've crossed my property line. I have documentation." He raised an eyebrow. "Already have maps, surveys, and deed on hand?" I held them up. He took a long look, nodded, and walked toward the orange flags. He tapped the ground with his pen, measured distances, and scribbled notes. "Yep, that's private property," he said finally. "They shouldn't be here." The president's face went pale. "Inspector," he started. The inspector didn't even look at him. He made a note, nodded to me, and turned back to the truck. The workers started shuffling their equipment back. Hesitant, nervous, I stepped forward. Voice calm but firm. "This is my land. Every inch. Step back now or you're trespassing." The president muttered under his breath. I didn't catch it at first. Then I did. "Fine," he said finally, voice tight. "We'll leave. For now." The bulldozer roared back to life, but in reverse. Orange flags fluttered. Slowly, carefully, the crew retreated to the edge of the subdivision. I watched every last piece of equipment cross the boundary. Every wheel that left my land was a small victory. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear. Not because of doubt. Because I realized they weren't going to stop here. The HOA was used to controlling everything. Perfect lawns, perfect fences, perfect conformity. And I wasn't perfect. I wasn't a part of their system. They weren't just upset. They were threatened. Threatened by one landowner who refused to obey rules that didn't exist. And threatened people do dangerous things. I looked at my boundary markers one last time before bed. Rusted, slightly crooked, but mine. Mine. No one could take that away. The next morning, the mailbox was full. Not the usual bills, not the usual junk. Thick envelopes. Heavy paper. Sealed with a logo I recognized immediately, Ridgeview Estates HOA. I didn't even open them at first. I just held them in my hand, letting the weight sink in. They were lawyers. Official letters. Threatening, precise, intimidating. This letter serves as formal notice that your actions constitute repeated violation of the community standards enforced by the Ridgeview Estates Homeowners Association. Continued noncompliance may result in litigation and injunctive relief. I read each word slowly. My coffee cooled. The sun streamed across my desk. I didn't panic. I never panic. But I did feel something that's rarer. Intrigue. I called my own attorney. "Yeah, it's happening," I said, handing over the envelopes. They sent lawyers. And the threat of court. My attorney, a sharp woman with a love for battle, chuckled. "Threats don't equal jurisdiction," she said. "Do they have a contract? Covenants? Anything signed by you?" I shook my head. "Exactly. You're untouchable. But you need to respond carefully. They're testing you, trying to intimidate you." I smiled. They had no idea what they'd started. By midday, I noticed activity again. Not just the usual HOA surveillance. This time, a small black SUV parked across from my driveway. Cameras hidden behind tinted windows. Faces unseen. I didn't confront them. I took notes. Every movement, every license plate, every pattern. This wasn't about a fence anymore. It wasn't about grass or mailboxes or visual blight. It was control. 2 days later, the HOA president showed up at my door. Alone this time. No bulldozers, no workers. Just him. Smug, confident, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "I need you to understand," he said. "The community has standards. You can fight us, sure, but we have resources. Money, lawyers, influence. You're one man." I leaned against the doorframe, relaxed. "Resources don't give you rights you don't have," I said. He scoffed. "We'll see." He turned to leave, but I caught his wrist lightly. "By the way," I said, "you might want to reconsider your next steps. Trespassing already happened. Documentation exists. County officials have verified my boundary." I saw the twitch behind his jaw. He didn't like it. He left quickly after that. That evening, another envelope. This one different. Hand-delivered. No lawyer stamp. Inside, a single note. "You're lucky the rest of us don't act like the president. Keep pushing and it won't be friendly." No signature. Just a warning. I realized something chilling. They weren't just playing by the rules. Some members had no regard for them. Some had their own agenda. And now I had become a target. I walked my land again at sunset, letting the silence sink in. The boundary markers glinted in the dying sun. Every oak tree, every patch of grass, every uneven fence post was mine. But it was more than that now. It was principle. They thought they could bully one man into compliance. They thought money and influence would win. They had no idea I was ready. Not just ready to defend my land. Ready to expose them. That night, I drafted a plan. Document every interaction. Hire a surveyor for an updated map. Notify the county and local authorities in writing about prior trespassing. Prepare a legal defense but also a public record trail. The HOA didn't know what they were up against. And they were about to find out the hard way. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of engines again. Not the quiet, distant hum of a lawnmower. Not the casual rumble of a truck. This was deliberate, aggressive. I looked out the window. 2 black SUVs, no logos, parked at the edge of my property. I counted 5 men stepping out. No smiles, no small talk. Just eyes scanning, hands tucked near pockets. I grabbed my phone. Not to call anyone yet. Not to record. Just to keep my options open. I stepped outside. Sun bright in my eyes. The men froze for a fraction of a second, registering that I wasn't intimidated. The tallest one, wearing mirrored sunglasses, spoke first. "You're aware you're trespassing against HOA regulations," he said, voice calm, almost rehearsed. I raised an eyebrow. "I'm aware that this land is mine," I said. "County deed, survey markers, plat map, all legal, all recorded, all public." He glanced at the others. "Your papers don't change community rules," he said. I laughed softly. "No, but they do change legal consequences. And right now, you're on my land. All of you." One of the men stepped closer. Too close. Aggressive stance. "You don't want to test us," he warned. I stayed calm. My heart rate steady. "Test you?" I asked. "No. You're testing me. And you've already failed." The mirrored sunglasses guy shifted uncomfortably. They weren't expecting pushback like this. They were used to homeowners meekly obeying rules, paying fines, adjusting fences, planting approved flowers. Not me. I signaled toward the boundary marker. "See that? That line? That's property law. You crossing it could cost you personally. Trespassing, intimidation. And yes, I have documentation for every action you've taken here." They looked at each other. The confidence from before was gone. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in the tallest one's eyes. But they weren't done. The man in the back produced a clipboard. "Our lawyers say you must comply," he said. I sighed. "My lawyers say the same thing you just heard. I don't have to. And now, you're personally accountable if anything happens on my property." At that moment, I noticed something else. A camera on a tripod partially hidden in the brush. They were filming. For what? Intimidation? Evidence? Or social leverage against me? I smirked. Recording without consent in a private space. "That's another layer of trespassing," I said. One of the men froze. The tallest one cursed under his breath. They hadn't thought I'd notice. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, the tallest man barked orders, and the SUVs slowly retreated. The men gave me a last glare that promised trouble, but I didn't flinch. They had underestimated me. They were learning. Slowly. Painfully. That night, I walked the boundaries again. I documented everything. Footprints, tire tracks, orange flags still fluttering from prior attempts, and even the hidden camera. I took photos, videos, and notes. This wasn't just about protecting my land anymore. It was about establishing a record, building a case, and showing them clearly, "You cannot intimidate me." And they were making mistakes every step of the way. As I walked back to the house, I glanced at the Ridgeview subdivision. Perfect lawns, white fences, uniform mailboxes. And yet, chaos was creeping behind the perfection. They thought control meant compliance. I knew control meant fear. And fear was exactly what I was about to use against them. The sabotage didn't start loud. That's what scared me. It started small, the way people act when they think they're clever. One morning, I woke up to find my gate open. Not broken. Not forced. Just open. I know how I lock that gate. Always have. Same habit, every night. But there it was, wide enough for someone to walk through. Or drive. Closed it. Took a photo. Wrote the time down. Didn't confront anyone. Yet, 2 days later, one of my boundary markers was gone. Not all of them. Just one. That wasn't random. That was someone testing how closely I was paying attention. I replaced it the same afternoon. This time with a GPS tagged marker and fresh photos sent straight to my attorney and the county assessor's office. Still no confrontation. Still no reaction. That's when I realized something important. They thought subtle meant safe. Then came the complaints. Not from the HOA directly, but from the city. Anonymous reports. Unsafe structures. Environmental concerns. Unpermitted equipment storage. Potential zoning violations. I knew exactly where they were coming from. The city inspector showed up midweek. Different guy than before. Younger. Nervous. "I've got a list," he said apologetically. "That's fine," I said. "I've got answers." And I did. Permits. Exemptions. Agricultural allowances. Zoning classifications. Every single complaint collapsed under 5 minutes of documentation. The inspector sighed. "Off the record," he said. "These complaints are coming from the same source. Over and over." I nodded. I figured. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done yet. I knocked on doors. Not angrily. Not accusing. Just curious. Ridgeview homeowners answered cautiously at first. Smiles stiff. Eyes darting. "Hi," I said. "I own the land next door. I just wanted to ask. Has the HOA mentioned me lately?" The reactions were telling. Some looked embarrassed. Some confused. A few looked genuinely shocked. "They told us you were part of the HOA," one woman said, "and refusing to follow rules." Another man frowned. "They said you were hurting property values." I nodded slowly. "And did they tell you I don't belong to the HOA?" Silence. That was the moment the narrative cracked. By the end of the week, I knew something they didn't expect me to learn. Not everyone in Ridgeview agreed with what was happening. Some were tired of the fines. Some were tired of intimidation. Some were tired of being told what color their doors could be. And now they were seeing it firsthand. If the HOA could bully me, someone who didn't even belong, what did that say about their power over everyone else? Friday afternoon, the HOA president sent one more letter. Short this time. Cease interference with community matters. No lawyer. No threats. Just panic, disguised as authority. That's when I made my move. I sent a single packet to the county. Inside, trespass documentation, survey records, inspector reports, timeline of harassment, witness statements from contractors, and a formal request for investigation into abuse of authority. Certified, logged, received. Once the county is involved, things change. Fast. That evening, I stood at my fence line as the sun dropped behind Ridgeview. The neighborhood looked the same. Perfect. But I knew better now. Behind those identical houses was fear. And fear spreads. They had pushed too far. And for the first time since this started, they were the ones reacting to me. The county didn't move loudly. It never does. There were no sirens. No announcements. No warning. Just silence. And that silence terrified them. The first sign was the meeting notice. A white paper taped to the Ridgeview clubhouse door. Emergency HOA board meeting. Attendance required. That word, required, was doing a lot of work. I didn't attend. I didn't need to, because by then people were talking. It started with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but I live in Ridgeview. You were right. Please call me." Then another. "They lied to us about your land." Then another. "The board is panicking." I sat at my kitchen table, phone face down, coffee untouched, and smiled for the first time in days. The county investigator showed up the next afternoon. No uniform, no attitude, just a woman with a thick folder and a pen that never stopped moving. "I'm not here because of offense," she said calmly. "I'm here because of patterned overreach." That phrase stuck. She walked the boundary, compared maps, reviewed my timeline. Then she asked the question that told me everything. "How long has this HOA been behaving like this?" I didn't answer. She already knew. That evening, Ridgeview exploded. Not literally. Worse. Emails leaked. Screenshots circulated. A private HOA board thread, never meant to be seen, started making its way through the neighborhood. In it, the president bragging about forcing compliance. A board member warning, "This could get us sued." Another suggesting pressure from inspectors. And one message that ended everything. "He doesn't belong to us, but if we break him, the rest will stay quiet." That was it. That was the line they couldn't uncross. The emergency meeting didn't go the way they planned. Voices were raised. People walked out. One board member resigned on the spot. Another demanded a vote to remove the president. Someone shouted, "You brought the county down on us." And for the first time, the HOA president wasn't smiling. He was sweating. I found out later that night what his mistake was. In panic, he'd tried to retroactively amend the HOA boundary filing, backdated documents, and signed approvals. Fake authority. He thought if the paperwork existed, reality would follow. Instead, he handed the county something far more valuable than intimidation ever was: evidence. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. Not from the HOA, from the county. Notice of formal investigation. Ridgeview Estates Homeowners Association. Potential violations: misrepresentation, harassment, unlawful enforcement, and trespass. I read it twice, slowly. Then I placed it neatly in my folder. Across the fence, Ridgeview felt different now. Quieter. Blinds closed. Meetings canceled. Board members suddenly unavailable. Power was leaking out of them, and everyone could see it. Late that afternoon, the HOA president came back. Alone. No clipboard. No sunglasses. No confidence. He stood at the boundary and didn't cross it. That alone told me everything. "We need to talk," he said. I folded my arms. "About what?" He swallowed. "About ending this." I looked at him, really looked this time. The man who had called the cops, sent lawyers, sent intimidation. And now, he was afraid. Part 8, I said quietly, is going to hurt. He didn't understand what I meant. Yet, the morning was quiet, almost too quiet. Ridgeview looked the same from my porch. Perfect lawns, white fences, street lamps gleaming. But the air had changed. There was tension hiding behind every window, every mailbox. They knew. I didn't need to wait long. The HOA president arrived first. Alone, slouched and pale. No arrogance, no smug smile, no sunglasses. Just the man who had tried to bully me into submission. We need to resolve this," he said quietly. I leaned against the fence post. Calm. Measured. "You want it resolved?" I asked. "Because the county already has all the information. Trespass reports, survey maps, complaints, letters, documentation of intimidation. Everything. Every step you took outside your authority is recorded." He swallowed hard. We can negotiate." "No negotiating," I said. "This isn't about negotiation. This is about the law. And the law is clear." Later that morning, the county investigator arrived in person. She carried a thick folder and a presence that demanded attention. "I've reviewed everything," she said, voice calm, sharp. "From property deeds to HOA communications. From prior trespasses to intimidation reports. It's all here." She tapped the folder. The HOA acted outside its jurisdiction at every step. They cannot enforce rules on landowners who are not members. Any prior violations or threats are null and void. And any attempt to enforce them could constitute legal liability for the HOA and its officers personally. The president paled. One board member behind him muttered under their breath. "You see," I said softly, "this is your reality." By noon, the HOA board sent a formal apology letter to me. Short, dry, carefully worded, legal. "We acknowledge that Parcel 17B is privately owned and not subject to Ridgeview Estates HOA jurisdiction. Any prior communications, enforcement actions, or threats directed at the property owner were in error. We regret any inconvenience caused." I read it once, smiled, read it again, filed it carefully. This wasn't just a win. This was total vindication. Over the next week, Ridgeview itself started to fracture. Some homeowners had already begun questioning board authority. Meetings were canceled. Members resigned. Lawsuits were threatened. Social media exploded with discussions about HOA overreach. And I went about my life like nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. I walked my land one last time that weekend. Every tree, every fence post, every patch of tall grass was mine. The boundary markers glinted in the late afternoon sun. I remembered the first letter. The first call from Karen at the HOA office. The bulldozers, the threats, the trespassing, everything had led here, and I had won, because I knew something they didn't. Land is more than lines on a map. It's ownership, documentation, and the courage to stand your ground. The HOA president never came back. Not with lawyers, not with threats, not with bulldozers. Ridgeview Estates? Still perfect from afar. But anyone paying attention knew their power had limits. I had turned their intimidation into exposure, their threats into evidence, their fear into my victory. And all the while, the land remained exactly what it had always been, mine. I sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. Quiet, private, free. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself smile.